I almost feel like I should be up here preaching.
Go ahead and preach.
Let me get to my spot, but I want to lead off by responding to something that came up about the issue of race. I was a special assistant to Mayor Michael White in 2001, and I was also a chief of staff to Emmanuel Anyuar in East Cleveland. I'm a former mayor, I'm a former police reporter, I used to publish a crime newspaper. I also led the Guardian Angels in the state of Ohio during the early 80s. I had 300 volunteers in this safety patrol in Cleveland, Columbus, and Youngstown, and I had a lot of encounters with police officers during that time. In my incarnation with the White administration, one of the things that we took a look at was Professor Ronnie Dunn at CSU had conducted a report for us for about 6 months. They took a look at all of the citations that were issued to Clevelanders. There were about 186,000 citations. 85% of those citations were issued to dark-skinned black males. If you go to Professor Dunn's report in Shaker Heights, where he took a look at the issuance of financial responsibility assurance citations, 85% of those were issued against dark-skinned black males. In the city of Akron, Michael Williams, a councilman, introduced an ordinance, an anti-loitering ordinance, and in that ordinance, which was basically deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of Ohio, it stated that 85% of the citations issued were against black males. There is a race problem here, and there is one that is based upon the subjectivity of police officers in this state to pick out who they think are criminals. I've run a police department and I've run a red light program, and let me just say this to you. When an officer is involved in issuing citations, the majority of citations are going to black people. But when you take away the subjectivity of a police officer and you bring in the red light cameras, and we don't like those, but one of the things that I noted in East Cleveland, in a city with a 94% black population, that 85% of the citations were to non-East Cleveland residents in zip codes that would traditionally have white residents in the majority. So there is a problem with race. It cannot be glossed over. I also want to say, as far as the consent decree is concerned, there have been a number of consent decrees in this country. In Chicago, there's one. In Los Angeles, there's one. In New York, there's one. In Miami, Florida, there's one. In Detroit, there's one. In New York, the police decided we don't want to be bothered with it, so the police chief told the monitor, you're not coming in the court, had them into the police department, and escorted them out. It took a federal judge to allow the monitor back into the police department. Don't get any false hopes that this is going to be the panacea. It's going to be a solution. It's going to present some ideas, but at the end of the day, it is not going to solve the problem, because we've had consent decrees, and New York was under a consent decree when Eric Garner was strangled. And this report was released just a couple of days after or before Tamir Rice was murdered. These things have happened. They're going to continue happening. One of the things that I did when I prepared for this presentation today was I wanted to go into how cops are trained. How do you become a cop? So I went to the web and I looked up a number of sites. And I found one in WikiHow. I want you all to go look at it. It says how to become a police officer in 5 easy steps with pictures. Now, I'm going to throw that at you because it kind of, we always talk about police officers, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but many times we don't consider them to be too bright. I mean, you look at the movies, there's always these things that they're doing. They look silly, they look foolish. Some of them look corrupt. At the end of the day, it's not a profession that we have associated with a high degree of intelligence. And I'm not trying to be funny or disrespectful, it just is. And so in looking this up, I decided to take a look at the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy's curriculum and the requirements for becoming a police officer. It takes 300 hours to become a licensed manicurist in Ohio. It takes 700 hours to become a licensed esthetician. It takes 1,500 hours to become a licensed cosmetologist. It takes 579 hours to become a certified police officer. And that's according to the training standards that are set forth by the Attorney General of the state of Ohio, who controls the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission. It is the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission that sets the standards for police across the state of Ohio, which is why if you take the report that they conducted of the Cleveland Police Department and you take it to Akron or Cincinnati or Dayton or Columbus or Creedsville, you know, in any place in Ohio, they're all under the same Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy standards, and they all get 579 hours. Let's take a look at the curriculum. First semester, 12 credit hours. Criminal law, 3 credit hours. Introduction to criminal justice, 3 credit hours. Defensive tactics, 2 credit hours. Defensive driving, 2 credit hours. Constitutional law, 2 credit hours. You know what 2 credit hours is? It's 2 hours a week of training. That's the first semester. So the constitutional law doesn't continue to the second semester. In the second semester, we have civil liability, 2 credit hours. Investigations, 4 credit hours. Police operations, 3 credit hours. And firearms, 3 credit hours. Get the picture, folks? As a mayor, I didn't realize that licensed cosmetologists had more training than the police officers I was administering an oath of office to. Every mayor who is a mayor in a city in Ohio is, except for in those cities where you have mayors who are councilmen who are in the cities that have city managers, every other mayor is the chief law enforcement officer in the state, in that city. They are a law enforcement officer in that municipal corporation. And in my capacity, I was the safety director as well. And under Ohio law, the safety director writes all the rules. The mayor hires, fires, promotes, demotes. That's the job of the mayor. The mayor writes all the rules. The mayor can change the rules at any time. The mayor hires the city prosecutor, who determines whether or not to bring charges. The mayor is fully responsible for making a determination if they want to change an ordinance to include stiffer penalties for police officers who commit crimes. The mayor can write the legislation and submit it to the city council. And the city council can deliberate on that legislation and determine whether or not they want to pass it. Your city council operates in the same manner as Congress or the Senate. They have investigative authority people. We have a safety committee chair led by Matt Zone. It's been Kevin Conwell and Zach Reed when the first report was released in 2002, and Frank Jackson was the council president. They took those reports. They did not read those reports. They did not implement those reports. They did not discuss those reports. They did not do anything relative to those reports when they were released in 2002. There was no investigation. There were no public hearings. There was no look at the litigation that every city gets in terms of civil rights cases when police officers engage in misconduct, and you find out in that litigation through depositions and other discovery that the officers might have tampered with a dash cam, that they lied on the record, that they concealed information in a police report, that they tampered with evidence or planted evidence on someone. We just learned that a Cleveland detective in the 70s coerced the testimony out of a 13-year-old black boy to lie 3 black men onto death row for a murder they did not commit. Did you hear your mayor or city council ask them to bring all of this detective's files for an investigation to see if these 3 men weren't the only ones who'd been railroaded into prison? Under the Justice Department, under the Obama administration, with Eric Holder as the Attorney General, they have conducted investigations of police departments in Chicago, where a captain by the name of John Burge forced testimony out of 200 black men and sent them to prison. Unlawfully. This is Obama's home territory. They did this in New York as well. There's a police sergeant who did the same thing. They did the same thing in Miami. They did the same thing in New Orleans. But no one's going back and taking a look at these files. In the last 6 years, there's been 0 criminal investigations and criminal prosecutions of police officers under the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Ohio of any police department, any. And I will tell you that in Mahoning County, you have sheriff's deputies who were sticking broom handles in the anuses of some of the people that they were detaining in prison, to those jails. These things are going on and they're real. As far as the training is concerned, I want to get back to the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission. When you look at the lack of training standards and you look at the curriculum, you'll see why we had 100 cops violating 2935.03 of the Ohio Revised Code and illegally crossed into the border of East Cleveland, following Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams, trapping and chasing them behind Heritage Middle School and shooting 137 bullets at them, and then failing to deliver the crime scene to the only legitimate police officers who were there, which were the officers of East Cleveland. If you look at all the video footage, you see Cleveland police officers who have no law enforcement authority in East Cleveland investigating a crime scene outside their jurisdiction. And I will tell you that when the two union presidents got together, Scott Gardner in East Cleveland and Jeffrey Fulmer in Cleveland, and the officers refused to talk and to surrender and to give statements until their union rep showed up. I'm gonna tell you, that union contract didn't mean anything in East Cleveland, and they all should have been placed under arrest, but that did not happen. It takes a minimum score of 70 for a police candidate to graduate from Ohio. 70. You only need to become a police officer, you need a 70 on the civil service test, a high school diploma or a GED. Those are the minimum standards for every cop in the state. RTA, Ohio Highway Patrol, you got some straight up hill jacks working in the trooper's office. I'm just telling you. Now listen, Eric Brewer and Craig Franklin, back in 2008 when Ted Strickland was governor. I'm saying this because Martin Luther King's birthday is coming up. And they played a prank. Wodlarski took a picture of Franklin wearing a fake KKK hood while on duty in a uniform. And they took a picture and they got busted, and I think Wodlarski said to Franklin said to Wodlarski, this is the day before Martin Luther King's birthday. This was in January 2008, around this time. I hope I don't stop a car full of niggas. Okay? The governor fired him. But in the state of Ohio, thanks to Dick Celeste and all these collective bargaining union laws that he got passed in the early 80s, a governor can't even keep a cop fired in the state of Ohio. We've just watched this happen over and over again. When they get fired, the arbitrators bring them right back. The pro-police union judges bring them right back. The pro-police union prosecutors fail to prosecute. I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting a little off because I got a lot to share and a little bit of time to share it. I want to give you all some insights into this training piece because I think it's extremely important that as we start looking for solutions, we're not going to look to the Justice Department, we're going to look to ourselves. Everybody in here is a registered voter, is that correct? We're going to give them our ideas, but we're not going to rely on them. We're going to do this ourselves, okay? We can change our charters, and since every mayor, council member, state rep, state senator, the governor, the attorney general, the auditor of state, since they all work for us, is their employers, if we express our dissatisfaction with them by rejecting their candidacies every time they show up and fail to do what they're supposed to do, instead of playing these old favorites games, instead of letting folks who've been acting like this is the Jim Crow South walk in here and tell us they're Democrats when they're really Dixiecrats. This is no different, okay? Until we get to that point, we are not going to have these solutions. Paul Robeson and W.E.B. Du Bois went went to the United Nations when it was first founded in 1951 and charged the United States with genocide for 5,000 unprosecuted murders of black people from 1894 to 1951. It ain't changed. Lou Stokes went to the Supreme Court in 1968, fought Terry v. Ohio that says cops cannot engage in unlawful searches of American citizens. That should have been trained out of the police in the last 47 years, and it's not been. It's not been because we've been relying on the wrong systems. We've been relying on the wrong people. We've accepted mediocrity from our politicians who've done nothing but provide us with lip service in these situations. Mike DeWine's been meeting with the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission ever since Tamir Rice. I don't know if y'all know that. They had 2 meetings in the last couple of months. The last one was on December 11th. So they're talking about training standards. I want to share with you who's on the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission. And I'm going to share with you this information so you'll understand why things aren't getting done. Reverend Dr. David Cobb, Emmanuel Baptist Church in Cleveland. Sergeant Ramon Diaz, Delaware Police Department. That's one of them little small cities. And you know, if he's a sergeant, that means that he got 579 hours of training. Detective Regina Dudley, Columbus Police Department, another 579 hours. Bishop Joey Johnson, the House of the Lord in Akron. Chief Joe Morbitzer, Westerville Police Department, where they got 5,000 people in Westerville. Tony Ortiz, Vice President of Latino Affairs, Wright State University. Vince Peterson, Trumbull County Adult Probation Department. Terry Russell, Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness for Ohio. Officer Sherry Shindy, Copley Police Department, another little small podunk town. Chris Smitherman, Cincinnati City Council. Dr. Reggie Wilkinson, former Director of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. Lieutenant Colonel George Williams, Ohio State Highway Patrol. Reverend Dr. Darrell Ward, Omega Baptist Church, Dayton. Prosecutor Andy Wilson, Clark County Prosecutor's Office. Major Darrell Wilson, Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. And Sheriff Keith Woods of Meades County Sheriff's Office. Now listen, folks. There are 88 counties in Ohio. All of them are 440 square miles, except Cuyahoga County is 60% Lake Erie, so most of them got land and we got water. But in Creeds County, where we got 1 million people, Creeds County represents 23,000 people. I'm sorry. That guy is on a training commission. These people are on a training commission that is supposed to be setting standards for police officers across the country. And I will tell you that what they are doing as people who are in this inbred system of folks who get only 579 hours of police training, they're really making this easy on themselves. They're not going to come up with a police training requirement that says you got to spend 2 years to be a cop. And you got to have over 1,500 hours of constitutional training. And instead of that training being taught by another cop who only had 579 hours and 2 credit hours of constitutional training, you get it taught by a lawyer, you get it taught by a judge, you get it taught by a prosecutor, and you get the right people in there guiding these folk. And before they can carry a weapon in this state, they got to certify that they've got over 1,000 hours or 15 hours of constitutional training. I have administered oaths of office to probably about 30 police officers. I had about 34 when I took over the city in 2006 in January. When I left, we had about 83 personnel. I fired cops, I promoted cops, I fired the president of the firefighters union and the service workers union. So I know they can be fired, and I know that the arbitrators, if you do it right, won't bring them back. But I'll say to you that when they raised their right hand and swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Ohio, the laws of the state of Ohio, and to faithfully perform the duties of the police officer and obey the charter and ordinances of East Cleveland, I asked them this question afterwards. Did you read those documents? And every single one of them said no. Why was Tamir Rice killed? Because I want to switch a little bit. because of a cop who was trained with 579 hours and 2 hours of constitutional law training, trying to enforce an ordinance of city council that our council should have removed from the books in 2007 when the General Assembly passed 9.68 of the Ohio Revised Code, affirming the Second Amendment right to bear arms and saying that all local gun ordinances were unconstitutional and outlawed. Don't enforce them. So, in dealing with that ordinance, the council has the authority to pass, amend, and remove. These cops thought they were enforcing an ordinance when the dispatcher should have said, oops, no violation of law, he possesses a gun. I think in their report it says the mere presence of a weapon is not probable cause for anything. So in a Second Amendment nation where people have a right to bear arms and a kid is playing with a pistol, there should not be a heightened sense of alert. There should not be a cause of alarm unless that weapon's being discharged, unless there's a story of shots fired or reports of a body, reports of a robbery in progress. So, I think I'm going to, I got time? Shut up. She told me to shut up. I know she really did. I'm gonna leave on this. Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy. It's the name of the academy. If you look at the laws, they're called peace officers. But if we deal with them in our police departments, they're called police. Why do we have police officers with a military consciousness? Because in the training, certification, superintendent of highway patrol says they instill military discipline. Now, I was in the military, and I know you've seen these cops on our streets, the ones that love donuts. They wouldn't make it in the military. I'm going to say this to you folks. I had a conversation with Pat Holland at the Board of Elections. He's the director over there. We train politicians on running for elected office, but we don't train voters on removing politicians. We don't train voters on initiatives. We don't train voters on referendums. The way we're going to solve this is we come up with some solutions. We give them to our state reps, state senators, congressional people, judges, prosecutors, the people we vote for. And we tell them at the end of the day, you don't support this, you don't get our vote. And then we punish those who still don't. We take them out of office. We replace them. I grew up in East St. Louis, 7 miles from Ferguson, Missouri. Bill Clay was the congressman, and my father drove a bus together. I sent him an email on August 26, 15 days after Ferguson, Missouri. I looked at their charter, and I said to Bill Jr., that all you have to do under Section 8 of the Ferguson, Missouri Charter is get your people to get 500 signatures, and you can recall the mayor, recall all the members of city council, change your charter to come up with a civilian review board, and you can change your charter to let voters file complaints and fire police officers. You can do that in Ohio if you tell your elected officials what you want. Your legislation gets written the way you want. The laws get written the way you want. If you want your laws written differently, you rewrite them. You give very clear instructions to your public employees. You put clear penalties in there for them if they fail to follow those instructions that you've given them, and you hold them accountable. This isn't their problem. This isn't the mayor's problem. This is your problem, and until you address it, it ain't gonna be done. Are there any questions?